Imagine waking up one day, and nothing you once loved matters anymore. Not your games, not your friends, not the noise you drowned yourself in. That's what happened to Emma, and that's the day her real life finally began. This was Emma's world. A blur of bright screens, flashing notifications, and the constant, deafening hum of a life lived online. She moved through dazzling cityscapes, surrounded by friends, their laughter echoing in noisy cafes. On the surface, it was everything. She had it all. The latest games, a feed that never slept, a social calendar that never emptied. She smiled for the pictures, she typed the right replies, she played her part in the grand chaotic performance. But beneath the glow of the screen, a different story was unfolding. In the quiet moments between the clicks and the scrolls, an emptiness lingered. A feeling she couldn't name, a void that no amount of digital noise could fill. She was connected to everyone, yet completely disconnected from herself. Every laugh felt practiced. Every shared moment felt staged. She was the star of a life that didn't feel like her own, drowning in a sea of distractions she had carefully built to keep from hearing the silence. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, something shifted. The sun streamed through her window, just as it always did, but the world felt different. Muted. Emma reached for her phone, the familiar weight of it in her hand. But as the screen lit up with its usual barrage of alerts and messages, she felt nothing. No excitement, no curiosity, just a profound and unsettling apathy. The vibrant icons seemed dull. The cheerful notification sounds grated on her ears like nails on a chalkboard. A message from a friend popped up, full of inside jokes and weekend plans. Yesterday, it would have made her smile. Today, the words felt like a foreign language, distant and meaningless. She closed the app. She tried her favorite playlist, but the music that once energized her now felt like an intrusion, a noisy disruption to a quiet she hadn't realized she was craving. The digital world that had been her sanctuary had suddenly become a prison. She looked around her room at the posters, the gadgets, the carefully curated chaos, and felt like a stranger in her own life. The vibrant colors of her world had turned to gray. The feeling was terrifying. This hollowness, this complete and utter detachment. For years, her life had been a sprint, a frantic race from one distraction to the next. Now she had hit a wall. The noise had stopped, and the silence was deafening. A radical, frightening idea began to form in her mind. What if she just stopped? What if, for one day, she disconnected completely? With a trembling hand, she held down the power button on her phone until the screen went black. A simple act, yet it felt like severing a lifeline. She unplugged her computer, her tablet, her television. One by one, the glowing sentinels of her life went dark. She sat alone in her room, now dim and quiet. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. It pressed in on her from all sides, filled with the questions she had been running from. Who was she without the likes, the comments, the constant stream of content? Who was Emma when no one was watching? The minutes stretched into an eternity. Doubt and confusion swirled in her mind. She felt an almost physical urge to turn her phone back on, to escape back into the familiar noise. But she resisted. For the first time in years, she was truly alone with her own thoughts. And she realized, with a jolt of fear, that she didn't know the person she was sitting with. As the hours passed, her gaze drifted across her room, landing on a dusty box tucked away under her bed. It was a time capsule from a forgotten self. She pulled it out and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled amongst old trinkets and faded photographs, was a sketchbook. Her childhood sketchbook. A wave of nostalgia, warm and gentle, washed over her as she opened its worn pages. Her fingers traced the lines of old drawings. Fantastical creatures, dream castles, portraits of her family. They were clumsy, imperfect, but they were filled with a life and imagination she had long since forgotten. Near the back, she found a page with an unfinished drawing. A lone tree on a hill, its branches reaching for a sky that was never filled in. She didn't think. She just acted. She found an old pencil, its tip dull with age. She sat down, the book open on her lap, and slowly, hesitantly, she began to draw. A faint line here, a bit of shading there. It was nothing spectacular. But as the graphite whispered against the paper, something incredible happened. A tiny, fragile spark ignited within her. A quiet, gentle flicker of joy. It wasn't the explosive high of winning a game or the fleeting validation of a viral post. It was something small, something real, something that was entirely hers. That tiny spark was all it took. The next day, she didn't rush to plug her world back in. Instead, she looked for another spark. She noticed a wobbly shelf in her bookcase. Instead of ignoring it, she found a screwdriver and, with focused attention, tightened the loose screws until it stood firm. The sense of satisfaction was surprising, grounding. A few days later, she found herself in the kitchen, not scrolling for takeout, but chopping vegetables. She wasn't following a complex recipe, just putting together a simple, wholesome meal for herself. The aroma that filled her small apartment was more comforting than any food delivery. She bought a simple notebook and a pen. She started writing. Not for an audience, not for a caption, but just for herself. Thoughts, feelings, fragments of ideas. Small, clumsy sentences that began to map the inner world she was just starting to explore. Each small act of creation was like adding a log to a fledgling fire. Fixing the shelf, cooking the meal, writing a sentence. Each one brought a soft, warm glow, a tangible sense of accomplishment that pushed back the gray emptiness. She was making things, not just consuming them. And with each tiny act, she was slowly, carefully, rebuilding herself. The world around Emma began to change, or perhaps it was Emma who was changing. The chaotic, jarring colors of the city seemed to soften. The relentless noise faded into a background hum. She started noticing things she'd never seen before. The intricate pattern of leaves on a tree, the way the afternoon light painted golden stripes across her floor, the genuine warmth in a stranger's passing smile. Her apartment, once a den of digital escape, was becoming a sanctuary of quiet creation. The focus was shifting, away from the external validation of the screen, and toward the internal satisfaction of making something with her own two hands. She looked in the mirror one afternoon and saw a stranger looking back. But this time, it wasn't a frightening stranger. Her eyes, once empty and distant, now held a new light. A quiet confidence, a sense of presence. She looked more alive than she had in years. She was discovering that true satisfaction wasn't a prize to be won or a level to be unlocked. It was something to be built, slowly and deliberately, from the small, meaningful actions of her everyday life. The joy wasn't in the finished product, but in the process of creating it. Months later, Emma is no longer the person who escaped her days. She builds them. Slowly, purposefully. Her life isn't about the frantic pursuit of happiness anymore. It's about the quiet cultivation of purpose. The sketchbook is now filled with new drawings, each one more confident than the last. Her walls are lined with sturdy shells she built herself. Her journal is thick with her thoughts, her fears, and her dreams. She realized her passion wasn't lost. It was just buried. It was buried under layers of noise, expectations, and the endless, hollow promises of the digital world. She had to get quiet to hear it again. She learned that happiness doesn't come from what we consume, but from what we create. It's in the satisfaction of a finished drawing, the warmth of a home-cooked meal, the clarity of a written thought. Passion isn't a lightning bolt that strikes from out of the blue. It's a quiet whisper that can only be heard when the noise finally fades and the soul begins to speak. Thank you for joining me for this story. If it touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content that inspires. We'll see you next time.